Well, hey y'all, how are you? So glad to see you here today. And I know building a masterpiece sounds a little like we're a little hubris, but we're hopeful. Okay, I'm Melodi Moore. I am a research development specialist at UTMB. I've been with UTMB since 2013. SciVal experts and I arrived the same week, and we've been married ever since. So now it's pure. So, Surya or Tiffany?
My name is Tiffany Cardenas, and I'm an application systems analyst, and I work within the Research Information Systems Department at UTMB with Melodi.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Surya Garimella, and I'm actually a software systems program manager working for the provost office at UTMB.
Thank you. So I like to refer to these two behind me as my resident genius tech people because I could not do anything. This would not be where we are without them. So just a quick agenda. We're going to go over some goals, some challenges, some integrations. That's the main part of our presentation here. And then looking ahead, what we're going to do. So the goals are going to include some grants cleanups, what we did with sponsor names, how we're adding cores and equipment inclusion. And then we're going to look at integrations, how we take local, some of them that we built, some of them that we buy, integration, the other systems, integrate them into Pure and make our entire Pure thing. And then some of the challenges we ran into as far as Dynasty, shadow systems, the guy who has the spreadsheet full of patents that doesn't want to share because it might have proprietary information on it, and some stakeholder communication that we ran into, and then data validation and accuracy. So to start with, in 2019, some of you may have been to a presentation I've given before. In 2019, the university leadership came up with the 2019 strategic plan to be revisited in 5 years. And then COVID happened, so it's going to be closer to 7 years. But they came up with these health communities that are based on our priorities at the time for research. Well, at the same time, Pure came out with these really cool United Nations SDG badges. And I like to say, we're in Texas. We have a hard time believing we're part of the U.S., much less part of the UN. So the SDG badges aren't used in Texas at all. But I loved the idea. And so I said, if I create badges, can we find a way to integrate them? And I'll talk more about that later. But so what happened is this strategic plan, these badges, they really drive our research. That gives our researchers and our leadership a way to say, okay, look, I'm doing what you asked me to do. Here's my badge. Here's my publications within the badge. And they're all, if you look at our website, which is UTMB Research Experts, or Research Experts at utmb.edu. If you guys want to go look at that, you'll see that our badges are on most of our researchers' pages and on some of our grants and some of our publications. But what we found when we started doing this is some of our data had some problems, some of our integrations, and so we spent the last year, that was our goal this year, to clean that up. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany, as I said, one of my resident tech geniuses, to tell you where we started, and then Surya is going to explain a little more.
Thank you, Melodi. As you can see, we have many applications and departments that contribute to our instance of Pure. We call our instance Research Experts. There's Power, which is our in-house application, Marketing and Communications, RIS, AE Capital Planning, RADS, which is our analytics department, and our InfoEd and PeopleSoft application. These are the two applications that my department supports, which are InfoEd, which has our pre-award grant data, and PeopleSoft that contains our post-award grant data. One of the initiatives we had was to pull grant data into Pure. We pulled this data from multiple applications, and as you can see, they each have different naming schemas. To complete this initiative, we created provision view tables. Another initiative that we had was a crosswalk between applications. Our previous source had a character limitation that led to sponsor names being cut short, as you can see in the before picture. To solve this, we crosswalked between our InfoEd and PeopleSoft applications. Now the sponsor name is fully displayed, as you can see in the after picture. This is the end result of both initiatives. Below, you can see the full sponsor name along with the grant amount associated with that sponsor. Along the way, we faced many challenges. For example, we had a change in leadership that led to a change in priorities and goals. We also had to work with shadow/dynasty systems and also needed to collaborate with many different departments. As a solution, we used our in-house Power application and increased communication with leadership and other key stakeholders. I will now be handing it over to Surya. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Tiffany just gave us a brief overview as to how the data is actually cleaned. So let's quickly take a step back and look at the different data points that are needed for Pure, right? So to begin with, we will need the faculty and researchers information. So like their names, their, like the basic employee information, and our HR PeopleSoft Oracle database is the source for this at UTMB. And then if you look at the demographics, so this includes different data points such as like their professional pictures, and we want their academic titles, the administrative titles that they hold, and their mission effort, for example, like how much % they're spending on administration, research, education. Like these are like different missions that they're actually split into. So all these kind of data. And the source of truth for all these demographics is power. So I'm going to get to what power is in a minute, but the source is power. So, and then there is the institutional footprint, which actually includes the different organizational structures that we have, right? All the business units, which are the schools, and all the departments, and how they roll up to each of these business units. And then comes the research profile, for which, again, power is the data source for this. And if you look at the financials, so this is where we have the award data, the project data, and all these line-level financial data. And we are pulling this from different sources, and I'm going to show that in the next slide. And then comes the clinical information, like, for example, the NPIs, the clinical information, right? So this comes from Epic, and we have processes. So we need a system that actually integrates all these data points into one. So that's where we come in. So what is Power, right? Power is an in-house institutional enterprise web application, which was actually built for faculty, which is extensively used by department administrators, so researchers, as well as faculty themselves, right? So there are two different versions of Power. There is a Power, which is the administrator-facing portal, and then we have something called My Power, which is more like, like faculty-focused version, which means when they log in, they get to see their information, which they can make changes to and everything. And then the Power part of it is more for the administrators, where they can, like create new requests, like manage data for the faculty, which, like reflects into other systems. So having said that, so this is our Power data flow. So if you look at it, we are actually importing data from different sources, right? So Epic, which is our medical data source. So we have the patient, the provider information, all that comes from Epic. So we have APIs that we pull in data from. And then we have something called FRPT, that is our financial reporting database. So that is an Oracle database by PeopleSoft. And we have CRPT, that's the Campus Solutions Reporting Database, which has student data. So that is, again, an Oracle database. And then we have something called HRPT, which is our HR database for employee records, which acts as a source of truth. And then we have something called DataMart, which is actually a shadow system that's being maintained by UTMB, which has data from all the other systems combined. And DataMart is actually our source of truth for all our ledger data. And then we have something called Cactus, and also we have an external source called UTMCO, right? So UTMCO is actually University of Texas Investment Management Corporation. So what do? Whatever endowments UTMB gets, these are all sent to UTMCO, and then they invest it for us. And then we get portions of those every year for us to actually budget on. So it's more about the endowment data. So that's what UTMCO gives us. And all this data is actually fed to our Power database. And then from Power, we actually feed it to external data sources, such as EPSI, Provider Search, Pure, HR, and the EDW. So when I say Provider Search, it's our external-facing doctor's website, like where you actually go in to see the provider information, like their education, their clinical bio, everything. So that's the public-facing site, which has all their pretty pictures and all that. So all that data comes from Power. And then there's Pure, and then there is HR, where we feed in some information like their mission effort, for example. Like I said, Power is the source of truth. So HR then accesses that information from Power, right? And then the EDW. This is the thing that we are building internally because, like I said, since Power is a source of truth and it's only a database, we wanted to build a data warehouse which covered all these information at a much higher processing rate, like which is a little more powerful than a regular SQL database. So that is where we are with our EDW, and going forward, EDW is going to be our source of truth for most of these, because we'll have APIs and everything that will access the EDW, and we'll have Power BI reports that will be built using the data from EDW, and there will be an analysis layer in between. Sorry, I'm getting a little technical there, but. So let's quickly look at this Power architecture, right? Like all that data is being imported to Power, but how are we doing it? So if you look on the left, you'll see all these on-prem ERP applications like Epic, Oracle, HCM. All these are our on-prem sources. So we import data from all these on-prem sources, and then we also import it from the external cloud applications like Taleo, UTMB, and all these sources. And how are we importing the data? So we are using Microsoft Azure Data Factory. So this is more like a data ingestion service from Microsoft. It's in the cloud. So what we do is we actually create pipelines in Data Factory. And what do these pipelines do? So we have all these sources where we find the data sets that we have to update every morning. So we run that differential data set, and we process that information, and then we put it into the blob storage in the form of a Parquet file. Most of you might be familiar with what a Parquet file is, but if you're not, those are just like flat files, but they are stored in a column level. So the only advantage is that the retrieval and everything is very fast compared to these flat files, like the text files. So we put these files into the blob storage, and then we have another process that kicks in, which takes the Parquet files and then loads it to our warehouse. Okay, and from our warehouse, the idea is to actually have APIs, web apps, and we have Redis cache, which is more like a temporary caching storage mechanism, and that is again from Azure. And we have cognitive services, where we now have our AI applications coming up. So we actually created a chatbot, so where we are actually feeding all this information for a faculty or a provider to that, and then we can start asking questions, and then it'll start giving us answers. Again, like most of you have heard yesterday, we have our own challenges with the AI because it keeps making up stuff, no matter what we tell it to. So that is one of the challenges we are trying to mitigate as well. And then there is some machine learning algorithms as well. So with all our sources being in the cloud, like security is another important factor for us, right? Like because being a medical institution, like with patient data and everything, we take security very seriously. Like how secure are we in the cloud? In spite of having a virtual network where our sources are all put in, and in spite of all that, like we still have our own compliance policies that we have to adhere to. So if you see, we have the HIPAA, like the ISO 20000, like all these are policies which our security team actually sets in place. And we actually work on our resources to make sure that everything is compliant. And we are kind of at 99% on that. So because these things keep changing every now and then, and there's work that needs to be done, to change the resource. Some expect like geo replication and everything, like even if it's like a development source that they expect us to, like replicate it. So we create exceptions and everything. So there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, even for the compliance part of it. So again, if we quickly look at how, like all that is good, right? Like we are bringing data into our Power database. Like how are we doing it for Pure? So we have something called Azure Logic Apps, which are basically custom workflows that actually access data from a SQL database, okay, which is the source of truth for everything. So we pull in data from a SQL database, and we have processes where it transforms this data into XML files, and then it then drops it into the storage, which is more like an Amazon S3, if anybody's familiar with Amazon. For Azure, we call it the blob storage. So for Amazon, it's the S3 storage. So we then put those files in the Azure storage and the blob, and then we run jobs in Pure that accesses this data every day. So the good thing is, like, our data is just like 24 hours old. So if something's updated the day before, so it's in Pure the very next day. So that's something that we do at UTMB. And if we actually see, so the Power application, that is our enterprise application, and then this is how we transform the data in XML and then feed it to Pure. So this is the final output on Pure. So with that, I'll hand it over to Melodi.
Thanks. Now you know why I call them my resident geniuses, because as he said, I'm going to go back a slide. So there is nothing in our system that is still there within 24 hours. If we have someone come in, they are in our system at 10 o'clock the next morning, the day after they're hired and in the HR system. If there's someone out, they're out of our system by 10 a.m. the next morning. It's constantly up to date. And you will also see that they handle all the photographs, all the pictures. We don't even use the Elsevier silhouettes. We have, based on HR data, we have our own picture silhouettes in there, so you can tell when you're talking to Dr. Fanu Akash who he is. So that helps us a lot. Now looking forward, what we're going to do in the next year is we've kind of run out of licenses, and we still have a year on our contract. So we're looking ahead. There are medical people in our system that have no research output. They have no grants. So we're going to move them to non-academic and move some of the research associates who are active in research in. We're also going to complete our equipment and core ad. Our cores are being reviewed and looked at. We're also going to move our publications and citations into an API to move into a faculty CB app. And then we're also looking at the new Pure portal and what additional needs and integrations we're going to need for that. That is everything we have. Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. David? There.
Yeah, en ik Veenstra from Groningen University in the Netherlands. As a former BizTalk developer, my compliments on your implementation.
Thank you.
I think that I could ask some Azure questions, but then probably everybody will start falling asleep. But yeah, this is the way you should do integration surrounding Pure. And the tragedy is that a lot of organizations probably will not have the resources to do this. So it looks really nice. So not a question, but just my compliments.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we have an amazing team at UTMB that actually help us, make it happen. So.
Any other questions?
So you talked about adding cores. What are these cores you're adding?
So we have cores like our mass spectrometer core, our core for biostatistician core, things like that. Now what happens is they have primary appointments somewhere else, but they're in this core, but they need to see their publications. So we're going to add them as a secondary, and we've had to come through that and figure out how we're going to do that, because it'll mess up the automation system. So we're working on that.
Thank you so much. It's very inspiring, but privacy issues?
Privacy
sorry,
issues?
Privacy issues, GDPR regulations, or?
So we have all our sources, again, like I mentioned, it's all in our VNet. So it's not accessible by any external services. So all our services that we created in Azure are all internal for us. But Microsoft still has access to those resources, which is kind of an eye-opener that is something that we got to know recently. And there is a feature called Logbox, which actually kind of locks it from Microsoft accessing those services.
And keep in mind, we don't bring patient data into this. That's just in Power. That doesn't come into Pure. That's just part of the Power situation. So we don't have patient data. We don't have just the HR data that you see publicly is what you're going to see.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, Melody, I think I have a question, actually. If we go back to your last slide, the things you're working on, you mentioned that you're participating in the new Pure portal activities, doing checking. What have you seen so far with your integrations? Is everything going smoothly?
So I've been assured that the integrations, since the Pure portal is mainly a front-end facing thing, that the back end is going to pretty much remain the same. And that's where we integrate, is in Pure, not in Research Experts. So Research Experts will change and look a lot differently. But how am I going to bring in the videos? How am I going to bring in the YouTube things that you say we can add? How am I going to bring in all that? That's what we have to discuss. Where's that going to go into Power, how are we going to bring it in? How are we going to upload it? Because I don't want to go into Pure itself because it messes up the automation and make changes without going through Power to do it.
All right, any other questions? All right, well then please join me in thanking our speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.